Hello, fanatical elves. This is the Village Elliot, and you're listening to, or perhaps watching, The Oracle Speaks, where I tell you about the past, present, and future of the Cleveland Browns. And today's show is going to be about the present of the Cleveland Browns and the past, some of the past Cleveland Browns that are still playing in the NFL, and I'll bet you'll be surprised to learn that former Cleveland Browns quarterbacks have thrown for many more yards than our current group of quarterbacks. It's well known that the Browns started 5 quarterbacks this season, but there are actually 7 quarterbacks that saw action in the NFL this year. And believe it or not, that group of 7 have thrown for 9,900 yards. And if you include their rushing yards, they have accounted for over 10,000 yards of total offense. That's crazy. I mean, that's really crazy. I can scarcely believe it that former Cleveland Browns quarterbacks, these guys that supposedly are so terrible, have actually accounted for over 10,000 yards. Whew. But it's true. And in fact, I've got some graphics that will prove that. And I'm going to put them up for those of you who have visual. Not everybody does. For a lot of you, it's an audio podcast, but many have YouTube or something like that. And so for you guys, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a little PowerPoint action going on here. And okay, from the beginning. All right, so former Cleveland Browns quarterbacks have been busy. On the left hand, those of you who have visual can see what we've done this year with our 5 guys. Joe Flacco, with I've kept it very simple, just the passing yards, the passer rating, and then a little column for rushing yards. Joe Flacco, by the way, has only rushed for 2 yards. He's had some negative gains, and then he's had a few more positive yards, but altogether it's averaged out to just 2. He's thrown for 1,616 yards. Passer rating isn't really that fantastic. It's 90.2. He's been held back because he's thrown a few interceptions that maybe we'd rather not have seen. But yeah, he's thrown some INTs. He's been more highly rated than Deshaun Watson. Watson's passed for 1,115 yards, and his passer rating is 84.3. His won-loss record, though, is pretty good at 5-1. And he's contributed 142 yards on the ground. Now, for those of you who think that, oh, well, I'd rather see Flacco be the starting quarterback next year, that's not going to happen. Flacco is too old to be the starting quarterback in a 17-game season, number one. And number two, Deshaun Watson is locked in for $200 million in the next 3 years, and we're not throwing that away. Hello, the Browns are not throwing away $200 million in the next 3 seasons. That cannot happen. Okay, now in addition, PJ Walker was in for a couple or 3 games, and he threw for 674 yards, passer rating 52.2, which is not good, and a few yards rushing. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 440 yards, passer rating 51.2. So, a little, about the same as PJ, although I think really he accumulated some very bad statistics in his first start against Baltimore, which we all agree was not a very good test because we thought that Watson was going to go, and then at the last minute they changed their mind. Watson was not able to go. DTR went in without really preparing as the starter, executing the game plan, which had been prepared for Watson, and it was a disaster, as you might expect, against a very good Baltimore defense. they've proven themselves to be much better than I thought they would be, despite having lost some premier defensive players in the secondary. They've been one of the top defenses all year long, and they really feasted on DTR. So much for that idea. And then also they signed Jeff Driscoll, and with 1 week of preparation, he went up against Cincinnati and didn't really do very well. Threw 2 interceptions, didn't get very many yards, and his passer rating is 30.8. Did rush for 33. Okay, he's a fast guy. I told you about that. He's really an amazing athlete, but he didn't have enough time with the playbook. I'd like to see him be brought back for summer camp next season, if for no other reason. You need to have some extra arms in camp just to have practice on a daily basis with all the people that you need to look at. So anyway, there you go. The Browns passed for over 4,000 yards, which is pretty good, 4,011. And then if you include the extra rushing yards, the total rush plus pass is 4,283. So, okay, let's go back. Remember that the Browns total as a team, 4,011 passing yards. But on the right, we find out that Baker Mayfield for Tampa Bay actually exceeded that number by himself. He threw for 4,044 passing yards and a passer rating of 94.6. That's higher than any of the Browns' 5 quarterbacks. How about that? He also rushed for 163 yards on the ground. That's higher than any of the Browns' 5 quarterbacks. So, Baker, well, there's no requirement that says just because Baker was let go that we have to stop liking Baker Mayfield. I still love Baker Mayfield. I think he's really great talent. I understand why he was let go. There was some sort of irreconcilable differences with the coach that they just were not getting along, and the conflict with Odell Beckham Jr. was just very unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is that Baker was butting heads with OBJ and doing so in a way that neither guy would back down, and it just really created a rift in the locker room, and they just really couldn't deal with it. So that's why Baker was let go, even though he was an NFL talent, and proved that by leading his team, Tampa Bay, to the playoffs, even though they were not expected to be a playoff team. Joshua Dobbs was our number 3 quarterback this season. We decided we'd rather have a number 6 draft pick. He wound up playing for Arizona and then later Minnesota, and did a pretty good job. Not a fantastic job, but pretty good. Passed for 2,464 yards. That too is higher than any of the Browns' 5 quarterbacks. His passer rating was 79.5, which is not great. He's lower than either Joe Flacco or Deshaun Watson. But he also rushed for 421 yards, which is kind of the difference maker. So overall, he was pretty good. I'd say Josh had a season that was comparable to Joe Flacco's, except that he did not have a team as good as the Cleveland Browns behind him, and he had a losing season, losing campaign. Tyrod Taylor, you remember Tyrod from the 2018 team where he didn't win a game, but he broke the Browns' losing streak. He had a tie against the I guess it was against the Pittsburgh Steelers in game 1. He threw for 1,341 yards as a backup quarterback for the Giants. Passer rating 89.1. That's pretty good. Almost as high as Flacco. Ran for 197 yards. That's better than anybody that the Browns had. So Tyrod Taylor, very credible backup quarterback. I don't believe that he's starting material at this stage in his career. But yeah, I'll take him. If he's available as a backup and wants to come to Cleveland, I'll take him. Why not? Nick Mullins, who was our 3rd string quarterback a couple years ago, also played on the same team as Joshua Dobbs in Minnesota. 1,306 yards, passer rating 88.4. That's between Watson and Flacco in terms of his passer rating. Okay, very good. he threw for a lot of yards also, but threw some interceptions that were instrumental in losing some games. We'll put it that way. Case Keenum was our number 2 guy behind Baker Mayfield, and he did not have a really good year. He threw for some decent yardage, but also got picked off. And his passer rating 61.1, his passing yardage 291. Brian Hoyer, the fossilized Mr. Hoyer, still out there. He was pitching for I was going to say Oakland. It's hard to say, the Las Vegas Raiders. Still the Raiders? I guess they are. And, the assistant coach, of course, was the Patriots' longtime offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels. And so he liked Case Keenum from his days in New England, and was rewarded with 291 yards and a very low passer rating, 61.1. Or excuse me, I'm reading the wrong line. 231 yards and 50.8. That's pretty bad. His rushing yardage total was only -3. He went backward instead of forward. Jacoby Brissett sat on the bench all year, got to start one game, threw for 224 yards, and I think he had 4 touchdowns. His passer rating was an unbelievably high 146.8. That's the Jacoby we saw in Cleveland. Contributed 19 rushing yards just for fun. And all told, that came up to, for that group of 7 quarterbacks, 9,901 yards passing, 823 rushing yards. The total was 10,725 yards. That's kind of unbelievable. It makes me wonder whether, well, in fact, I'm not even wondering. I'm sure that the Browns overpaid for Deshaun Watson. They felt that they had to do it. They had to have a franchise quarterback. And I don't really believe that you need to overpay for quarterbacks. You can find somebody who can execute the offense, somebody like, Jacoby Brissett, who could be good enough to win for your team. And you can spend the money. If you had to spend $230 million, why don't you spend it all on defense and shut the other team out, and then you only need to score 1 touchdown? I think that's fine. Spend it on defense. Buy 3 defensive ends, and I'll be happy. A lot of people compared this to the 2016 campaign, in which we had 6 quarterbacks. Now, some people remember. I've heard a few fans say that, didn't we start 6 quarterbacks one year? And the answer is no, we didn't. We only started 3 of the 6. Cody Kessler started 8 games, and he was actually pretty good, even though he was a rookie, and I think he was a 3rd-round draft pick. And you should not do that to a rookie. You shouldn't, throw him out there with a lousy team. But the Browns did that. That's, they believe at that time that rookie quarterbacks are just fine, and that's when they peak, in their rookie year. You never wait for them to mature, never give them the benefit of sitting on the bench for the first year. So anyway, he had 8 starts, and of course, everybody was getting injured because the Browns did not have an offensive line that season. They decided to let Mitchell Schwartz at right tackle just walk. We don't need right tackle. Screw that. And Robert Griffin III was brought in as the veteran. They decided that he was washed up. He could still play quarterback. Mind, he was not an all-pro at that point in his career, but he could play quarterback. He started 5 games and got beat up. I think he was had a broken collarbone or something of that order. Same with Josh McCown. I think he was knocked out of the game at least twice. And both of those guys had passer ratings about 72. And Kevin, okay, so that's 5 starts for Griffin, 3 for McCown, 8 plus 5 plus 3 is 16. That accounts for all 16 games. Nobody else started a game that season. Kevin Hogan was another guy that the Browns got on waivers. That was a guy that John Dorsey drafted in Kansas City, and then they couldn't find a roster spot for him. He was not very good. He had a passer rating of only 31.6, which is awful. It means he threw a lot of interceptions. He's an exciting player, but yeah, he put the ball up for grabs a little bit too often. Charlie Whitehurst, a.k.a. Clipboard Jesus, because of his long hair, played and also got injured. Threw for 182 yards, passer rating of 78.8, which is not great, but it's acceptable. Terrell Pryor was a wide receiver, very good wide receiver. I think this was the season that he got 1,000 yards, but he had to play quarterback. He was a quarterback at Ohio State, and everybody else got injured that game because they weren't blocking anybody. And so he went in and handed the ball off and threw a couple passes and completed a few for 41 yards, and his passer rating was 67.4. So that team had 3,693 passing yards, not very good, but they had 6 quarterbacks, and everybody lost time due to injuries because of very bad blocking on the offensive line. This is how not to have young quarterbacks brought up in the NFL, get them injured, beat up, running for their lives. And you can't learn to play quarterback that way, fans. It's just really stupid. And those who believe, and I'm just putting this in the bottom, if there's anybody that actually believes that the rest of that 2016 team was good enough to go to the Super Bowl and all they were missing was a quarterback, you need to get your head examined. This was a bad team. Quarterback was not the only problem. And I think that there were quarterbacks that could play football on this team. In particular, I think Josh McCown was good enough to be a starting quarterback. And so was Robert Griffin III. I don't think that they were necessarily outstanding at this point in their careers, but they could play quarterback and they could have won some games had there been a team around them. But there was not a team around them. So I just don't believe that they were as terrible as people think. They were not terrible quarterbacks. They were good quarterbacks on a terrible team. And you could not see how good they actually were. All right. Speaking of Baker Mayfield, I want to take some time for a public service announcement. When they were in Cleveland, they started the Baker and Emily Mayfield Foundation. And this is from their website. Quote, "We provide programs, scholarships, and philanthropic opportunities to help others tackle life's challenges in order to be the best version of themselves." And I believe that Baker Mayfield knows what it means to be a number one quarterback, and he loves that role. And, you know, they love going to hospitals and visiting people, and you have no idea how inspirational NFL football players and particularly quarterbacks can be. They can change the lives of these kids. It's for real. So hats off to you, Baker, and hats off to you, Emily. You know what it's about. And recently, this is just from past New Year's, and thank you to Brianna's Blitz for posting this on, I believe, Instagram. They hosted a Passing the Joy event for Boys and Girls Club of Tampa, and they just absolutely loved it, and they basically hosted a shopping spree for kids. I guess they were disadvantaged. I don't really know the complete story, but Baker said that they were very surprised when they did this type of thing, that the kids typically did not shop for themselves, but they shop for the rest of the family. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Okay, we'll pause at this point for commercial announcements from our sponsors. We're grateful to all of you for letting us do what we love to do, and for all the fan support that we've been getting. And I'll take 5 seconds of real time here, and many of the platforms will be supplied with commercials by our leader, and very grateful to Johnny Cleveland for all the organizational activities that he has to keep our shows going. And we're back. Thank you, Johnny Cleveland. Thank you, Baker and Emily. And by the way, if I didn't thank Free Sound Music for providing the music for our show, thank you to them. All right. I wanted to talk also about the 2013 team. The Browns had a pretty good year this year. This is the same graphic that I had before on the left for those who have visual, showing that the Browns passed for 4,011 yards. That's really the main thing. The rushing yards aren't really that significant. But, Flacco, Watson, PJ, DTR, and even Jeff Driscoll all made valuable contributions to get the Browns over 4,000 yards. Of course, it's in a 17-game season, so that's kind of like cheating a little bit. But still, it was a very respectable yardage total for the passing game, especially given that there were all these injuries on the offensive line. They lost a all-pro tackle in Jack Conklin, and then they lost their guy at left tackle, two guys really at left tackle, and so they were down to their third string. And I think that really that they may have had injuries at left tackle, and continue to play through it. We've been wondering, gee, what's going on? Why is this guy not performing up to his level that he played at 2 years ago? And I think, he might have been having some problems before he went down. And, I'm talking about Jedrick Wills, that he never complained, and they don't really like to broadcast how what exactly their physical condition is, but there's nobody that's actually ever really healthy on either the offensive or defensive line. They're all banged up to a certain extent. And I just think that his mobility might have suffered this year, and that if he gets healed up, he might play at a much different level next year. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. But anyway, I'm not ready to get completely down on Jedrick, although I'll agree with his critics that he didn't play well for the Browns this season. But I think that there might have been reasons why he appeared not to have that lateral mobility that he showed earlier in his career. All right, so let's look at the 2013 team. This is actually the record holder for passing yards in Cleveland Browns history. It's not Brian Sipe. It's not Bernie Kosar. It's not, from that generation of players. It's not even Otto Graham. Of course, Otto played in a 12-game season. Otherwise, he probably would have had the records. But it's the 2013 season. We had Norv Turner, who's well known as a Hall of Fame. I think he's in the Hall of, well, maybe not, but as an offensive coordinator, he should be in the Hall of Fame. With Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith and all those guys, Larry Allen, Moose Johnson, and Michael Irwin. They just had a tremendous amount of talent on those Cowboys teams. And a lot of it has to do with the offensive coordinator bringing it out. But anyway, he was the offensive coordinator for one season. And, this group of players did pretty good. That was the year that Josh Gordon was unstoppable and had like 1,700 yards through the air. Jason Campbell supplied a lot of those passes. He came in for Brandon Whedon, who was actually the quarterback that started the season. And he just, Brandon just really didn't quite get it going. And I think the reason was, people complained that he was too old when they drafted him, and that's exactly right. You can't take 4 years off to play baseball and expect to pick up your development as a pro football player at the quarterback position. Things didn't develop in your brain like they need to in order to play quarterback. It's kind of like learning a foreign language. If you don't learn it as a kid, you're always going to speak with an accent as an adult, and you just don't quite get it to work completely right. You just can't get it quite exactly right, even though you study very hard and you work as hard as you can. It's just not going to work out. And then Brian Hoyer came in for the last 3 games. I forget whether it was because Jason was injured or they just figured, well, let's see what the kids got. We got to get ready for the the draft so we can draft Johnny Manziel or whatever the hell it was they were going to do. But Hoyer did very well, won the 3 games in a row, and performed at a high level. But all told, they added up to a very acceptable passing game. So they fired Norv Turner after he set the record for passing yards. But this is another case of when they had more than one quarterback, and yet they combined for a very strong team performance, even though they didn't have one guy that you would consider a franchise quarterback. I guess I would say, though, I think Jason Campbell was a lot better than people thought, but he played for Washington teams that were pretty bad, and then he played for Raider teams. He actually had 1 winning season for the Raiders, and he looked pretty good. And then he got traded to Cleveland, and he just really didn't play with very many good teams. But I think he was a pretty good quarterback, and just never got the opportunity that he needed in order to show it. All right. So there you have it. The amazing but true story that the Cleveland Browns have had a very good season with their quarterbacks, all 5 of them, and yet they've also proven that the quarterbacks that they had in the past were not so bad. Quarterbacks that have been here and gone have gone on to very good seasons. I'm not completely thrilled with the idea that the Browns had to spend $230 million on one quarterback. This is not an attack on Deshaun Watson. It's not his fault. I fault the Browns front office for making that decision. I'm glad for Deshaun that he got a very big contract. I'm in favor of athletes getting all the money that they can get. And but I think that the Browns made a foolish decision to spend all that money on a quarterback. I think that they would have been much better off investing less money at the quarterback position and investing more money on defensive linemen and cornerbacks. That would have been what I would have done. Nevertheless, the Browns will seek to go forward with Watson. They will not make Joe Flacco the starting quarterback next season. And if you look at the numbers, Joe Flacco has been very good, but he has not been, he's not put up like Peyton Manning numbers or anything like that. He's been good. And the Browns can win with him. The Browns could also win with some of their other quarterbacks if they are called upon. I believe that they'll be up to the challenge and they'll be competitive with the other teams. Right now, the game that they need to get ready for is in Houston, Texas. I think that's going to be a tough nut to crack. We'll talk more about that in the upcoming week on many of our shows in the Fanatical Elves Network. So take care, everybody, and go